Hey everyone, and welcome back to Salesforce Mojo. Today we're going to be talking about Commerce Cloud LWR checkout updates. Now, if you are watching this live or right when it comes out, thanks for coming back. I know I've done a little bit of a break here over the holidays, but I figured I'd start off the new year with something that's really impactful, and that is, of course, checkout. And as you probably know, there's been some updates over the last couple of months in the last release that are really important for us to cover and understand how this affects the development of checkout. So in this video, we'll be going through kind of the concepts that are changing, but we also have a new component that we're going to be releasing in the Code It Forward library for shipping addresses. So if you're interested on seeing how that is applied to the new updates and also getting a first look at what this component is, stay tuned. We're going to be jumping right into it. Welcome back to the new year, everyone. I know it's been a while since I've had a video. I thought I'd start this year off with something that changed towards kind of the end of last year, but I think it's going to be really important for us all to get on the same page, and that is checkout components. Yet again, so the previous version of the checkout wrapper, as many of you probably know, is currently being phased out. At the current point right now, you can have it on the page layout, and you can kind of see a screenshot here on the right-hand side where it says Checkout Legacy. You can have it on the layout if it was already there before the transition. If it was not there, it's no longer available, so you have to move into this new methodology. And this replacement provides a little more flexibility around the container layouts. There's actually two different types of wrapper components inside of the component area now. There's the layout one page and there's a layout accordion. And while both of these were available in the checkout now called legacy version, they're different components now and they interact a little bit differently, but the core fundamentals of how to set the stages and kind of go through it have altered a bit. So I want to walk through what the different key areas are you should know. And then as part of this, I actually want to dive into a component I built out to illustrate this that I thought would be helpful to mock out, and that is shipping addresses. So why don't we first start with how checkout has changed and how we understand moving from one stage to another. Now, previously, we had the ability to report validity and check validity. Now, the concepts of that stay the same. However, how this is actually implemented in the component is a little bit different. And we also have additional stages as well that I wanted to talk through. Now, I'll try to do my best to explain this as we're going through the different rows here, but then I'll also pull up the actual diagram that Salesforce has on their website. And then as we actually go through an example, I think it'll start to become clearer. Now, the check validity update and report validity save, now these are similar to the two that we had previously. Now, when you look at actually using these, they are slightly different. The check validity is really around making sure that you have the appropriate information in your fields. They pass the initial checks, and then once they've passed that initial check, then it moves to the report validity. And the report validity save is really around updating your components and or reporting any errors to the user in the UI. So when I asked a little bit of questions about what the difference is between the two of these, what I was told is that the check validity is more of a silent actor here and is used to be able to determine if I should try and move to an update or not. For example, if you require a first name and the first name isn't filled out, well, the check validity should be the one that checks that initially before it tries to go and make an update and fail potentially. So that's kind of how these two are used in tandem, and they are used either at proceed or place order, depending on if you're using the accordion or single page layout. Next up here, we have the before payment and payment stage actions, and these are what you would guess, the information around before and the actual payment itself. Now, the before payment is something that could be used in a custom implementation. This is not something I believe that is used inside of the standard payment components. It goes straight into payment. But for instance, if you needed to reserve inventory in an ERP or an external system before you actually go into payment, you could use this action to be able to, or the stage I should say, to be able to actually do that before you move and try to authorize the payment method or capture the payment method. So those two are used in conjunction here. Then we have our next segment, which is placing the order. And again, before place order is something that you potentially could use in a custom implementation to do an action before you actually place the order. And then place order is the standard, being able to place the order and complete it and be redirected eventually to the order success screen. And you can see here I'm on the checkout component communication page in the custom checkout components for B2B or B2C store LWR. That was a mouthful. But you can see I'm on the sub page right here, and what this page does is try to articulate how the actions are used throughout the different components and interactions the customer or the end user might have. So if we scroll down, they're actually broken out into two segments here, the one-page processing flow, and then there's another one for the accordion, which has a little more information on that specifically. But you can see that it actually talks a little bit about the check validity updates and when these are called and how they're actually interacted between the different pieces of the checkout framework here. Now the specifics around the before and the place order, it's just a little bit confusing when you read this, which is why I try to break out the definitions and when they're actually called. But you can get a good idea of when these are all called, and you can see how they're called from the different pieces in here. And for instance, I mentioned the reserve inventory as potentially. You can see that that is actually noted right here and in kind of a custom implementation. So you can see how the buttons and the data provider and the checkout components all interact together in order to successfully make it all the way to the order confirmation page. So if you're new to this and this is your first time going through this, I'd encourage you coming here and just taking a look at what actually happens when you click place order or you fill in information, and reading through this probably a couple times to get an understanding of that. And then hopefully the example we do in a moment will make it even that clearer. So the next thing we should talk about is something called aspects. Now, this is actually a really exciting functionality of this new checkout capability, because aspects allow us to understand what's happening in a little more clarity and also interact with what the checkout wrapper and sections can do. Now, previously, you could kind of get to some of this with some customization and interpreting the different stage values. There was 0, 1, 2, 3, and you could really do some stuff off of that, but it wasn't always completely reliable, and you didn't have all the different capabilities that we have now. So let's first talk about read aspect. Now, there are 3 that I'm aware of right now, and if you know of more, feel free to put a comment in the video, and I'm happy to make some updates here. The 3 that I am aware of right now is summary, which indicates if the summarizable component should be rendered as summarized or not. So we can listen to if it's in summary mode or not based on the true or false value of this actual aspect here. Second, we have collapse, and collapse indicates that the expandable child section should show as collapsed or not. And then the third here is read-only if valid, and what the docs I can find say is it indicates checkers is preparing to place order step. Now, I personally haven't used this last one yet, so I can't vouch for exactly how this is actually interacting with checkout, but that is the third one here. Now, if we move over to the set side of it, so now let's say that we load a component and I want to change something. Well, we have the ability to do that with aspects. Now we have the summarizable aspect here, which gives us the ability to put the component in summary mode. We have the uneditable, which allows us to hide the change button in the accordion, which I think is pretty powerful. We'll kind of see this in my accordion view in a second, but there is a change button, which used to be, I think, edit in the last one if you were an accordion, and you really had no control over that button whatsoever. Now we have just a little bit more control of being able to completely hide that button if we want to. And the last one here is collapse, to set if we want the section to be collapsed completely or not. Now with that, I should actually jump over into the Mojo org and see what the component is that we'll be working through here in a moment. All right, we're back in our Salesforce Mojo org here, and the first thing we'll do is we'll head over to checkout. And you'll notice right out of the gate that we have a slightly different checkout look and feel now than we did previously. I mistakenly removed the old checkout before I took this video, so I'm not going to be able to show you, a live remove and add of that old component, but what I can do is you can see that we have, if we go over to our structure section over here, and we go to our checkout accordion right here, I'm actually going to remove this completely. And we'll actually start from the beginning because it is kind of helpful how it's dropped into the pane here. So if you move over to the component section here, you can see that we have a couple of checkout things in here. We have all the individual ones, but you can also see we have the accordion and one-page layout components. And what's very helpful is if you move this over and drop it on the page, it will automatically pre-fill all of the components in the right sections, in the right components in each section for you, which is pretty handy. It's building that out. And it's using some of those new hooks that are available with some of the new LWC capabilities that come out in the last couple of releases. So once we have that on the section here, you can see that we have our normal sections. We have our contact information for guest. We have shipping instructions, delivery options, and then payment. And then of course you can add custom ones if you would like. Now I'm going to do a couple things first just to make sure we can move through checkout quickly, and I'm going to drop in our simple purchase order right here. And then once we've done that, what we're going to be working on today is this shipping address component here. Now, shipping address, depending on your business, can be a lot of different things. It could be optional if you actually aren't shipping information, if this is all going to be digital content. It could be only optional if you have physical goods in your cart, and in some cases it may always be required. But I think it'll be a good example to walk through because whether or not you're doing shipping, you're likely doing billing information in some way or some address information in checkout. So I'm going to walk through what that potentially could look like. So I've got our component here structured out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through kind of the important pieces here, and then this is going to be made available through Code It Forward and the repository that I help maintain. So you'll be able to find that there as part of the completion of this video and the posting of it. But let's actually start on the HTML side. It's not super simple HTML, but it's also not extremely complex either. It's really just a couple of divs and a field set and formatted lightning address for the individual address that's shown, and then we're iterating over the address if there's multiple of those. We do have the add new capability in here as well if you wanted a new address, although in the starter component that I'm putting together, that functionality actually doesn't work, but the hook is there if you want to make that applicable. And then we have the summary and selection capability. So we'll walk through some of that a little more detail as we are actually seeing it in the UI. But that's the HTML. Diving into the JavaScript side, now this is the important stuff that's actually changed from the last version of Checkout to the new version of Checkout. And one of the things to keep in mind, like we talked about just a moment ago, is the checkout stages. So in your components, you're going to want to define what these stages are. This is how I've done it in the past couple of components, creating a variable and defining the different values for that we can use down below. You could do it in other ways, but this is just a way that I've seen done in the past. And then once you have that, you actually need to extend checkout component base. And you can see that I'm importing that up here through the Commerce Checkout API. Now this is different than the previous version because the previous version you didn't need to extend anything. You just placed it inside of the wrapper component and it just magically kind of knew. We're extending that now so we can use some of the capabilities as part of checkout. And we're also importing the checkout information adapter as we have in the past, and some mock data that I'll walk through in a second. So skipping past some of the variables here, the first thing that we always do in these components is, at least the ones that I've developed, is the checkout information adapter. This allows us to be able to process where is checkout currently at and is it ready to interact with. So you can see that we're capturing that information, and we're using, and I've talked about this in previous videos, where we're using a function called isInSitePreview. And we're checking to see if we're in the experience builder or not. Now, in my opinion, this is very important. Some people don't agree with me, but in my opinion, this is very important because if you're an admin and you're configuring checkout, you want to be able to see what it looks like. What if you have a set of properties that changes the look and feel of it and changes it from like a card view to a list view? Well, I want to be able to see that and see if it's the right user experience without having to publish it. So this allows you to be able to detect if it's in preview or not, and if it is, then we are passing the mock data that can be found in this JavaScript over here, and you can create whatever structure you want. Right? Maybe you're not using the checkout information adapter, maybe you're using custom Apex and your controller has it structured in a different way. Great, go ahead and mock your data in that way, and you can pass it in using a similar functionality, but I do think the user experience in Experience Builder is very important. Now, once we've gone through that check right here and we've determined we're not in Experience Builder, then we're looking for the status of 200. You can see I've done a little bit up here. 202 is while checkout is starting. 200 means that it's ready to actually process. If you start your process too early, when it's 202, you try to save information to it, you're going to get all sorts of errors that you don't need to deal with, or you shouldn't need to deal with. And so we're checking for that status, and then we're grabbing the information about our delivery address from the checkout information adapter, and we're doing a get address here so that we can gather the information additionally. So this is going to tell us, what has been saved to the cart or the checkout, and this get address data is right now I'm just pushing in the mock data. You can do whatever you want. Sometimes this requires, a SOQL, so going out to an Apex and grabbing information that way. But in a shipping address component like this, you're probably going to want to display the multiple different addresses. And those addresses need to likely come from the contact point address attached to the account and the contact that you're showing the data for. So you're probably going to have to make some type of Apex call out to grab that information. And then once you have it, you're going to need to take it back and transform it probably in some way. So in past components I've built, we've had something like the get address data here, and then a transform addresses function that actually parses that and tells us which one is currently selected from the delivery address above and which ones haven't been. Now I'm going to pause here in the JavaScript just for 1 second. I'm actually going to go over into our Experience Builder, and let's actually drop in our addresses component, shipping address. So we actually can go into an experience and see what this looks like. And once it loads in here, you can see, and I'm just going to actually preview this, not publish. And you can see that there's a little bit different format. In the version I have here, we're using more of a card version where the radio button is used below. Again, you could change the UI of this to however you want, but you can see that we have a selected state, we have a non-selected state, and we have a new addresses state, which, as I mentioned, is not fully hooked up, but the hooks are there. So when I'm talking about being able to show the multiple addresses here and be able to know which one's selected or not, that's kind of what I'm referring to when it comes to this shipping address component. Now hopping back over the code here, we've talked a little bit about how to grab the initial state, how to collect the get addresses here. You can see we have a handle pick addresses function in here that will allow us to determine when an address has been picked, and you'll probably want to do something when it's been picked, right? So you either want to do something right when the user selects it, or you might want to wait until they've actually progressed to the next screen or click proceed. That's up to you. So you can either handle it in a function like this, or you can handle it in what we're going to talk about next, which is the stage actions. Now the stage actions here are where some of the newness comes in with the new checkout here. You can see in our version here we are using check validity update and report validity update. And based on that, we are calling out to our function here of checkout validity or report validity. And you can see in this version, check validity, I'm just passing as true. And in report validity, I'm actually looking to see if I have more than one address. Now, in a real version of this, you're probably going to want this to be a little bit more intense than this. You probably want to check not only do you have addresses, but is one selected and did it save successfully? So you might actually be doing the saving here. You might be doing it previously, again, up to you. But you probably want to check some of that. And if all of those statements are true, then you're going to want to return a true to the actual checkout adapter so that it knows that it can proceed. Because at this point, if it gets a false, then you should display an error. And again, something new with this new version is if we go back over to Experience Builder, you can see at the very top we have a checkout notifications. And checkout notifications is a way we can show notifications at the top. Now, there might be use cases where you want the notifications globally at the top, and maybe you want them embedded in the field itself. The ones in the field itself, you can handle kind of normal ways of JavaScript and variables and all that funness. But this dispatch update error async, it's a mouthful, is actually how you can pass it up to the top. And this allows us to put whatever exception we want in there. An address must be filled in. And this actually will work. So if we go over and remove the mock data so it doesn't have any addresses, this notification will actually show up in checkout when we get to our section. Or I should say, when we click next out of the section, because these are called when the user is actually in Experience Builder and they click proceed on whatever section they actually are at. So if I click proceed right here, it would actually show a notification here at the top for me. So that's the majority of it right there. And we've got that function I mentioned earlier about knowing if it's in preview or not. But that's the structure that we've seen in the past. Oh, I should say one more thing actually. The set aspect is actually quite important. Now, I mentioned set aspect as the ability to set the aspect and read the aspect. So in this case, I'm actually reading the aspect. And the set aspect is listening for new aspects. And if the new aspect here has summary, then we are returning true for these two variables. And we're actually using these variables to change the state. And based on if it is or is not in summary right now, we'll then turn it to false. And so that will allow us to actually switch the experience a bit. So if we go over, and I'm actually going to publish this, and I'm going to hop in as a user so that we can see those states changing. All right, we're logged into our storefront here, and we're on the cart page. And what I actually wanted to do first was show you what it looks like when the checkout is initially loading, to show you why it's so important you do something like checkout information adapter. So if I move into checkout and we look at the console here, we're going to start to see a couple of messages pop in from the console. And you'll see that initially the checkout status is 202 as it was kind of loading. And you can see that it loads and loads and kind of checks to see if there's any updates that happen. And then you can see the information start to build out, but it's still in 202. And then eventually at the very end, it switches over to 200 and our component loads and all the other components load. So if we were not listening to that state, we could prematurely load this and start to get some weird error messages about checkout not being found and a bunch of other stuff. So I figured I'd point that out here while I'm on the screen. Now, you can see that inside of this card right here, we only have one address to begin with because we've only mocked one address for us to be able to see here. But I can select it, and as I select it and I proceed, you can see that the card has slightly changed. And I know it's subtle in this situation here, but let me go back here. So we have the actual title here, but if I move back, you can see that it's a little bit different. You get the select a shipping address has changed a bit, and the card has changed. The new address is no longer there. So we're actually switching between what we're calling summary mode and what we're calling, the actual edit mode. So if I go back over into my HTML, you can see that I'm checking for that status. And if it's in the summary mode or not in the summary mode, it's going to show all of the cards and the checkbox and the new and everything like that. And if it is in summary mode, we're showing just the summary section. So that's a good example of how you would use this new set aspect to be really meaningful in your development. And then if we wanted to control the aspect, let's say we wanted to say we don't want the change icon or button that shows up here to show up at all, we could push a new aspect and force that not to show up, or force a section to be in summary mode, etc. So those are good examples of how you can use those aspects to really change your checkout experience. Now that's a wrap on the new checkout. Feel free to ask any questions inside of the comments, and hopefully the walkthrough of a practical example of a component and how this can use this information will be valuable as you guys begin to get into the new checkout experience. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.